Footy Journos back here at the Brandon for the first time in a while. So good to see you, Liam.
I know, it feels like the first video I've been on in ages, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah, you're back. Well, thank you for coming, because it was flying solo for the press conference, Eddie Howe's press conference this morning. Eddie Howe spoke about the head of the game to Manchester City, Newcastle match at Manchester City. I was going to say Eddie Howe, I meant Liam, you've thankfully joined me here on Valentine's Day. Happy Valentine's Day.
I know, I had to, didn't I?
I would say there's no one I'd rather spend Valentine's Day with, but I would be lying. But you were close.
Yeah.
Close top.
There's no one I've got to spend it with, so I'm happy to be with you, mate.
So yeah, happy Valentine's Day to everyone as well. Eddie Howe got asked that as well, but we'll move on.
I'm not. Look, I watched the press conference. That was pathetic.
Okay.
I'm not having those early questions, I'm sorry. Okay. I respect everybody as a journalist, but using your half hour for questions like that, no, sorry.
Yeah, okay, I was limited to one question.
I know,
as well.
for that reason. Because questions at the start of the press conference are absolutely ruining the chance any journalists have got to ask proper ones.
You're lucky you don't come to these press conferences. I'm not making any comment on that, but yeah.
I don't come to press conferences, so maybe I'm watching it as a viewer, and I want to know the nuts and bolts of what's happening in the training, what Eddie Howe thinks of this, thinks of that. I didn't really think there was much digging into, like, I wanted to hear what he had to say about Guardiola, and he kind of skirted around. I want people to go in and get him, but nobody was given the opportunity to really get to the nuts and bolts because he was asked all sorts.
Right.
Look, everybody's got their own needs and their own agendas and where they need to go with their content, but I'm struggling to see what that adds in terms of value for the regular fan as I watch it as a fan.
Okay. This is not the direction I was
expecting. Should we leave this in?
It's not the direction I expected the video to go, but I'm not making any comment on that as someone who attends the press conference. People ask their questions, whatever. I got limited to one question, which is obviously frustrating, but Newcastle's media manager, Lee Marshall, apologised to me, so that's fine.
Yeah.
And yes, Eddie Howe was asked about injuries, which we'll start on.
Yeah.
Because there's Anthony Gordon, Dan Burn, Sven Botman. Again, was quite firm in Anthony Gordon, available, trained this week. I think the club made it quite public that Anthony Gordon was available, picturing him in training. Sven Botman and Dan Burn weren't pictured in training, and slightly contrasting injury updates on them, because Eddie Howe said Dan Burn will be very close to playing, where Sven Botman will probably miss the game. So he hasn't completely confirmed or denied whether either player will play, but it sounds like if one player is going to be in the squad, it's going to be Dan Burn.
And if he trains on the Friday, today, or whenever you watch this, then you imagine he'll be in the squad, and it will be a massive boost for them because he's a huge miss. As Bruno Guimaraes said in an interview with some other video channel somewhere.
Adopted Geordies.
Whatever it is.
You're just throwing everyone under the bus. Hey, good interview, check it out.
Yeah, good topic, I suppose. What I would say is, I think Dan Burn's been the main man this season. Lewis Hall was my standout player up a few weeks ago. I think he's a young lad. He's had a couple of moments, lesser performances by his really high standards. Whereas Dan Burn's kept that level of consistency from the start to finish. I think being a good lead, he's a leader, a character, and who'd have thought it? Genuinely, when Dan Burn was signed, I remember having these conversations in and around people who know, and he was almost seen as like I think he was a stopgap,
I think, yeah.
And I think it's credit to the man and the player that he's made himself to be so much more than that. And he's a cornerstone of this dressing room, of the club. He's a Geordie. He gets what it means. I think people take the mickey out of that at times where they're like, oh, really, do you have to be? I think elements of that within a squad mean everybody gets it, because there has to be an understanding within that group, and he gives that. But not only that, he's playing really well, performing well. He adds different dynamics to the team that nobody else can. His size, his leadership. He's a captain without being the captain, and I think he's just a perfect role model for everybody else in that squad. If you want to keep your levels high, a lad who isn't the most talented in that squad, isn't even close to being the most talented in his position, but outperforms people all over the park because he's got that and he's got that. Yeah. And I think he's brilliant. And if they can have him back tomorrow, they've got half a chance. I think it's that key. Look, they've got players who can do a job. Fabian Schär was one of the standout players as a left centre half last year, last season. He was one of the standout players. He can play that position, with his eyes closed. It's not a problem really. But when you lose Dan Burn from the back four, you suddenly go to a back four that looks quite small. There isn't a lot of height.
Yeah.
Physically, there isn't a lot of height in that team when you take that out, because you've lost. Joe Linton was one of the regular markers from corners. Yeah. You've already lost him out of the team. Then you take Dan Burn out of the back four and you haven't got a Sven Botman there. You suddenly, Fabian Schär, who I think you probably admit himself, his aerial duels probably aren't his strongest point and never have been. He's got much stronger suits than that. But you potentially go back to a back four that could look like Hall and Trippier with Emil Kraft and Fabian Schär. And I'm not saying that it's definitely going to be an aerial assault from Man City, but you want to have that insurance policy that you have a bit of height if you need it, and it's a big thing that they lose, and you can see why Eddie Howe values him.
One thing you would say about Dan Burn and even Sven Botman, and you could even go to Jamal Lascelles previously, he always gives Erling Haaland a battle and has kept him quiet historically. And Haaland against an Emil Kraft, for example, out of his natural right back position, it's not as comfortable for Newcastle heading into the game.
Well, if I'm Erling Haaland, for all the strengths that he has, he's a tremendous footballer. But if I don't see Dan Burn on that as one of those two centre halves, I'm quite happy. I'm probably thinking I've got a chance of really giving these two the run around the day because of the type of player that he is. He's physically imposing, he's quick. He's always going to have the speed over anybody in Newcastle United's backline, but he's then also going to have the physical, which, like I say, in the games where he's played against him previously, Burn's always done all right against him. I wouldn't say Haaland's always been the best performer against Newcastle United, being brutally honest. Apart from possibly that first one after he signed, was it the 3 each?
He scored in that game.
He gave Botman a bit of a run around that game. I think Botman's was one of his first games.
Yes, he did. But since then, has been kept relatively quiet.
He has since then.
Touch wood.
But no, I think he's a big loss to the team if he's not there. But look, I don't think Eddie Howe. We had different takes on it. I watched it from a distance. You were there in the room with him. You said you thought we weren't sure when he came away that he'd be involved, whereas I thought, listening to him, I think he might be.
Well, his initial quote, I think he told Matthew Raisbeck, was that Dan Burn, it will be very close, and I was like, oh, well, that's a really positive sign. So I asked Eddie Howe, positive news about Dan Burn. He's been one of your players of the season. I think Bruno, like you mentioned that. What do you think of that? And then he went to say it will be a hammer blow if we were without Dan Burn. So he's already, in my head, I'm trying to connect the dots, as you like to do. He's saying it will be a hammer blow to be without Dan Burn, so he's already speaking as if there was a situation where he could be without Dan Burn. So I thought going from very close to saying hammer blow to be without him is an interesting way to put it. I thought it was a little bit of backtracking from Eddie Howe, though you take what he says initially at face value. How is Dan Burn? He's very close to playing. So yeah, I can see your point, but I just thought it was maybe a little bit of backtracking for me.
Anthony Gordon's good news, but we kind of knew that anyway. We knew he'd be back. He was pictured in training, wasn't he, this week? So that was quite an obvious one. But no, it's good. It's kind of puts you in a bit more of a positive mindset, I think, if those two players are available. And knowing that Botman isn't a million miles away, knowing he would potentially come back next week. Yeah,
that's what it sounded like.
That's a big positive going into arguably what's the most crucial run of games of the season. That's probably one thing that we've disagreed on off camera, isn't it, a little bit? I know everyone gets really sort of sensitive about the idea of it was a huge drop off prior to the cup final last time. I think Newcastle United are much better suited to win this final against an even better team, and Liverpool are much better than Manchester United were last time. I think Newcastle United are much more likely, and I think they've got a better chance this time because Newcastle are so much better themselves. And I think that, to me, is the biggest game of the season now. And I think it's obviously that's obvious, but what I mean is I really don't think the next couple of Premier League games have much prominence in that respect. I think you can recover in the Premier League after.
There's only 14 games left, is all I'd say.
3 games that they've got in the run-up, bar West. The West is the 4 games with West Ham.
Play West Ham on a Monday night.
So West Ham on the Monday night. To take West Ham out of the equation, well, let's just keep them all in. So in the 4 games, corresponding 4 games last season, Newcastle had lost 3 drew 1 at West Ham. Probably should have won at West Ham. Nottingham Forest was a disaster on Boxing Day, and the other two were the regulation defeats that kind of come as part of the course at Man City and Liverpool. So I think even if Newcastle United play well, and they're different teams, different games, different circumstances, I suspect they're probably going to lose a couple of these anyway. So for me, I wouldn't be worrying too much about necessarily the points total that they get in the run up to that. It's probably more about performance and keeping players fit, because I think you can recover. They've then got a run of games after the final where it's now you make hay. You've got to get results in that next run of 5 or 6 to give yourself. The last 4, I think, become quite challenge. There's a challenge in all of them, whether it be the last day with the Moyes affected Everton, or whether it be going to Arsenal, who, yes, I know Newcastle United have steamrolled them really in the 3 games to an extent and haven't conceded a goal. I think they'll probably have a bit between their teeth in that one to get something. And you know what, if they did, you couldn't complain. Newcastle won the ones that mattered when they needed to. But no, I think the league can be recovered. I think the league's quite nip and tuck with lots of teams. You wouldn't want to drop off a cliff. I'm not saying you're right off the 4 games, but it's important to get some kind of momentum and maintain something. But I'm not hugely bothered about the results as much. That day on the 16th of March is what matters. That really matters, because that the scope of that, we all talk about it, but if you actually really think about what that means, it would end everything, wouldn't it?
Yeah, no,
do you know what I mean? End everything, that angst, that anxiety, that feeling. The way we all talk, I don't do it anymore, I've stopped myself. You still do it.
Yeah,
Jordan does it, where it's like, oh, but it's Newcastle, or we're unlucky, or with this, we'll never do this. All ends. If they do what they need to do on that one day, in a month's time, 4 weeks' time, it's gone. And it's gone forever. 70 years is gone forever. Generations have felt it and know what it means. And the generations to come won't be living with that monkey on their shoulder for decades and decades and decades. It ends everything. That's why, to me, it's more than a game. And I think they can win it.
No, I don't disagree with you. The only thing I would say is don't take your eye off the league. I mean, obviously, you'd absolutely take losing almost every game between now and the end of the season if it meant
you would if you'd made a deal with the devil today and say you lose every single game between now and you beat Liverpool on March the 16th. I don't think there's a Newcastle United fan out there wouldn't take that deal.
I think we've put this out previously, and it's more divisive than you'd think.
Is it?
Yes, because people go,
you've got to
be Champions League, that's where you want to be. And all I would say, to going back to your initial point of the upcoming 3/4 games, is you need to be closing that gap on Nottingham Forest. You're not going to finish above Liverpool or Manchester City. There's a half chance. We'll see tomorrow really where Newcastle stand in that. Nottingham Forest, you need to be closing that gap. If you don't close that gap, you probably don't get Champions League, is all I'd say.
So, what's the biggest fear if you don't get Champions League?
Big players leaving.
Right. Who's the biggest player Newcastle have got at the moment?
Isak, in terms of value.
He was interviewed on Sky Sports within the last 7 days and given an option. Which one would you think is most important? What would you prefer? It was Golden Boot, him win the Golden Boot. It was qualify for the Champions League. It was another option. And it was win the Carabao Cup. And he didn't even hesitate to pick the Carabao Cup up. He said, because of what it means to everything. That's the main man who might leave, saying that the Carabao Cup matters more than qualifying for the Champions League. So that kills that argument altogether.
Does it though? Because it's an ideal situation for an Alexander Isak, for example, because he could be Carabao Cup, absolute hero, wins that, medal round his neck, he could still join the Champions League club.
And he might still. Anyway. And chances are, if Real Madrid want him, Newcastle United will win the league, and he's still going.
Yeah.
So that's the argument I always throw back at that. There's only probably 4 or 5 clubs on the planet can even consider signing Alexander Isak. One of them's probably going to win the league in England. One of them's probably going to win the league in Spain. One of them finish second, and possibly a select band of others. Newcastle United cannot stop that happening. The only thing that can stop happening is by charging a lot of money. And the best position they'll find themselves in was what they did with the PSR situation in January, where they don't put themselves in a hole where they're having to sell and they've got to go into their head in June. Which clubs like Aston Villa will have, because they've rolled the dice. Other clubs will have guns to their head. And Newcastle United don't want to be that anymore. They've got to be the hunter, not the hunted, like they were last summer. So for me, chances are that I'm not as married to this. A lot of people are, and I respect your opinions. I'm not as married to this Champions League or bust with Alexander Isak idea as everybody else, because I think if Newcastle United finished 6th and they didn't get in the Champions League, it doesn't change the amount of clubs that can physically buy him, because they've put themselves in a reasonably strong financial position. They're going to ask more money than that will take 10 clubs who might want him out the equation. He probably wouldn't go to 6 or 7 of them anyway. He probably, in his eyes, only thinks my next step is big step.
Yeah, the very top. Yeah.
So he's only really in England going to go to Manchester City, who've already got Erling Haaland, so they're not going to sign him. Liverpool, and like I said, the couple in Spain, one who we never know whether they're going to afford the players they've currently got, never mind another one.
They like to roll the dice. So.
But if you went to somebody like that, you wouldn't complain. You'd wipe your hands and say, you know what, that's fine. Sign for Barcelona, sign for Real Madrid. Beyond that, who else is there? Bayern Munich. I mean, is Bayern Munich, is that the step? Is that the best step for an Alexander Isak who's performing at the best level in the best league in the world would take? Harry Kane went there after he played 7 or 8 years scoring goals in England, and will end up coming back. He went there because he thought he might win trophies, and there was a chance not to have to sign for a top one who Tottenham probably wouldn't sell to. And there was a chance for him to maybe go and win some trophies. Alexander Isak's a totally different prospect.
I mean, me and Jordan said when we were down at Arsenal at the start of the year, this Arsenal talk was sort of, Jordan wasn't happy with it at all. He was like, shut up. But the Arsenal narrative, it's like Alexander Isak has surpassed that. The step between Newcastle and Arsenal isn't a big enough jump, in my opinion. Whereas the step from Newcastle to your likes of your Man Cities, your Liverpools, Real Madrid, although size of clubs you can argue, but I think if Alexander Isak leaves Newcastle, it has to be to go to the very top.
It's because he's at a crucial point in his career. He's 25. So if you take that next step, which might only be a small baby step, you know, in your head you're probably only going to say, this is 2 years. So are you going to leave Newcastle with Arsenal for 2 years?
The thing is, like, this is a really sort of obtuse way of looking at it, but Newcastle, since Alexander Isak signed for Newcastle, have come closer to winning trophies than Arsenal have. They've reached 2 finals. Arsenal haven't reached any. If you want to look at it in a very success point of view, okay, Arsenal have had title challenges, but never by the end of the season they were.
Well, look, Arsenal, if they performed like they had last season, this season, they'd be where Liverpool are now, but they've totally bottled it. I don't think anybody really disagrees with that. There isn't an outstanding team, I don't think, in English football this year.
We watched Liverpool the other night, didn't we? And Everton gave them a proper game.
What Liverpool have got is, we mentioned it, they've probably got the best average squad. Like, they've got really good players. They've got a player in most of their positions that can interchange and not make too much of a difference, which makes them really capable of fighting on lots of fronts. Obviously, they went to Plymouth, slipped up, it can happen. Everton, Derby, it can happen. I think Liverpool are a really, really good side. Who knows, they might give Newcastle a run around in the Carabao Cup final, but it doesn't feel like that. I don't think there's as a bigger gulf as so they're runaway leaders in the Premier League. If Newcastle had Manchester City in a cup final now, I think it would feel different, because Manchester City under Pep Guardiola at their peak were not the same as Liverpool are now.
No, I think you're right, but just going back to the Alexander Isak point, because it was a decent talking point in the press conference from Eddie Howe, where he said, look, we can't lose players like Alexander Isak. He is a crucial part of our short-term and long-term future. So that's Eddie Howe basically coming out very strong regarding Alexander Isak's future, which has been a consistent message from the club, to be honest, amid all the talk. But then he was asked again, which he's been asked a few times, like, would you rather have Erling Haaland or Alexander Isak? And, I mean, you could predict his answer, but it's an interesting point. As manager of Newcastle United, he would obviously rather have Alexander Isak, but from your point of view, our point of view, my point of view, I'd rather have Alexander Isak. And I know we did a video quite a while ago that no one watched, by the way. Go back and watch it. It was early days Geordie Turner.
It was first 6 months,
I think you and me were in the Erling Haaland.
Haaland wasn't even,
Whereas Jordan, probably great hindsight, saw something we probably didn't necessarily
we're all wax lyrical about Isak in the video. Whereas
we just saw Haaland as like a goal-scoring machine, which Isak, when we were filming it, which was the start of last season, before he'd scored 25 goals, we're still seeing like only the early stages of Alexander Isak. But I think the past 18 months, for me, particularly the past 2 months, I'd say, has been the best striker in the world, and I wouldn't swap him for anyone. I'd even go as far as saying, I think I've said this in videos, other than Alan Shearer, I think he's Newcastle's best ever striker. But that's
without being
without me having a time machine that I've seen
modern
in the
era,
flesh.
yeah. Because we can't really judge what we haven't seen.
Yeah.
I still think it's a really tough decision.
Yeah.
Aye, I do.
I'm firmly Alexander Isak for Newcastle United and what they need.
Yeah.
Alexander Isak. I think Erling Haaland it would be less effective in
Possibly.
the team.
I think Erling Haaland still, if you put him in Newcastle's team, might score more.
You reckon?
I do. I think he might score more. I think he's starved of service at times. Man City have never really played to his strengths. You see a lot of the goals he scored when he was younger at Dortmund. I mean, he's playing on the shoulder. He's quick. He's not just a big unit.
Very fast, yeah.
He's very fast. He's a good finisher, lethal finisher when he's confident. I think people are really keen to overlook what Erling Haaland brings. What he doesn't bring, which Isak does, which makes him stand out, is the link play, the touch. The Eddie Howe talked about it today, the idea that he's played him on the wing and that he's got certain characteristics of a winger, and it's that idea he can beat anybody on the outside, he'll drift inside, he'll beat you with a bit of skill, he's brilliant, and that's probably definitely what Haaland doesn't have. I do still think Haaland is probably more lethal as a striker, but I also think, I don't ever think, and again, I don't watch Man City every week, but I've watched plenty of them. I don't think Man City really play to his strengths. I think if Erling Haaland was playing for a team like Newcastle, for example, who create a lot of chances and give strikers in most of the time. We'll have periods where we'll create nothing, obviously, every team does, but most of the time, on average, create quite a few chances for strikers. I think Haaland would score a hatful for Newcastle. I really do.
I don't doubt that.
Yeah.
I
think he'd score more than he scores for Man City.
Would he score more than Isak? Well,
I
by that definition.
I think he's a more natural. You know, if you're going to typecast footballers, he's more of a natural out-and-out centre forward than Alexander Isak will ever be. However, Isak isn't that player, and he's just different. He is also. I see a lot of people say, "No, but he should play. He's more of a 10. He's not. He is he's a number 9, really, but just a very different one. Just does a lot of different parts of the game, and I really enjoyed. This is what I'm talking about. This is getting to the nuts and bolts and hearing a manager talk about things that we don't know. Yeah. And one thing that I found really interesting from the press conference today was when he delved into the Isak thing about saying working on his game, almost making, because we haven't seen a lot of the Everton one where Isak's on the wing and he's beating players and he's dropping out wide and he's creating things for the players. That Isak hasn't really existed this season. And it was interesting how talk about the training they've been doing with him. What they've been talking about is get in those areas to score goals, and what's happening, he's scoring more goals because he's a good finisher, and he's got the instinct, and he's there where he should be, and he's not doing the other stuff which he can do as well for other people, for no one else to be there. Yeah. So I thought that was really interesting to hear the dynamic that Howe's had with Isak and how he's improved him and changed his game slightly in some ways, which only gives you a certain amount of questions when people are asking silly ones. That's what I was kind of getting at. To hear that kind of insight is the type of thing, surely, what every press conference is built for. Yeah,
and he was Isak, I think's become a far more complete striker since the one he signed. One Newcastle signed back in 2022, and it's interesting because you talk about when he was out on the wing and creating that goal for Jacob Murphy. One thing I've noticed this season, I think creatively Alexander Isak has come on leaps and bounds, even though his scoring has sort of continued and arguably improved. I was looking up the stats because I was like, I'm sure he's a very good chance creator for Newcastle. Only Anthony Gordon's created more chances for Newcastle this season.
Right. I thought Jacob Murphy would be with a shout for that, wasn't he?
No, he just gets assists. He's lethal. He's clinical with his assists. But Alexander Isak, if you think the amount of times he puts people in, and it's just because he's not the one on the end of them. Yeah. It's the less clinical players on the end of them, so the chances aren't being converted. He's still got 5 assists this season, which is more than he had in his previous 2 seasons combined.
So is it?
He's become a creative
does that kind of force discount what I was saying? But I was more saying he doesn't go out on the wings as much.
Yeah, where it was more
he's more moments
of individual brilliance. Where now it's a touch, turn, through ball, and I think he's really quite good at that. If you're talking about a clinical finisher, which he is for the most part, in terms of just incisiveness, bringing players into the game and releasing players, where you've got the pace of Jacob Murphy and Anthony Gordon, who can make decent through balls into very good through balls, then I think he's really come on and spearheaded Newcastle's attack in a attacking sense, but also a creative sense this season.
One thing I want to ask you is what's the team tomorrow? So let's just say, let's say Dan Burn is fit.
Right.
What's your team? Because he did change things up personnel-wise when he lost Joe. We haven't seen him pick a midfield without Joe Linton, have we? That's right, isn't it? Joe Linton got injured in the Fulham game.
Yes.
And Arsenal, he went 5 at the back, so the extra man was Botman.
Yeah.
We haven't yet, and
No,
the other day
yeah.
didn't, you know, it was a
lot
total
of
change
rotation,
team.
yeah.
We haven't seen his first 11 without a Joe Linton in it, so I'm really intrigued to see what he does and how he goes with it. I mean, it's also, of course, he'll know better than anybody whether, you know, could you play that 5 again? Has he even got the personnel to do? But if Dan Burn's there, could you maybe go with Cher and Botman is virtually replaced in that 5 by Emil Kraft and you do the 5? Or does he go back to his roots and go back to the 3 and bring in somebody? And who does he bring in if that's the case?
I would say the Arsenal game, although it was very effective, was a unique situation in the fact Newcastle went into the game with a 2-0 lead. I'd probably stick with the 4-3-3. Dan Burn I'd start because, like you say, he's been one of Newcastle's top performers this season. You'd play Fabian Schär, right centre-back. The right-back's an interesting argument because Tino Livramento came in against Birmingham, but then Kieran Trippier was really good against Arsenal. I'd put Trippier back in, and we've been fairly consistent in, well, I think, I'm sure you agree, but shout up if you don't, I think he's Newcastle's best right
So
back.
what I've been thinking, again, and maybe this is me taking my eye off the ball, is I would be making sure that Kieran Trippier is as fit and in his best position to play in a month. So whether that means it might not mean playing him every single game until then, but I think his experience and know-how in that game, he starts the final. So I would make sure he's in the best place possible for that final.
Yeah. One thing Eddie Howe did say is like he's not managing games based on the finals. So
I am in my head.
It's all that matters. But yeah, I'd start Trippier just because I think he's got that nous. Although
come on, then you're skirting around. What's your midfield?
Okay, so
has to be
Lewis
Joe
Hall
Willock, probably.
Joe Willock gets rewarded for a good
Probably.
performance against Birmingham City. Starting on the left of the midfield, where you have Sandro Tonali as a 6, Bruno on the right, and then Jacob Murphy right, Anthony Gordon left, Isak through the middle. I think the team almost picks itself if Dan Burn's fit.
Yeah.
And then there's a decision to make, centre mid, but I would say Joe Willock, of the centre mids who Eddie Howe has available to him, was the only one who really took his chance and grasped it at Birmingham City with his 2 goals and was involved, albeit on the left wing. And then right back, there's a toss-up between Livramento and Trippier.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think I didn't see your video that you did last time. Well, I think there was a lot of criticism for Longstaff. I thought he had a poor game against Birmingham. It didn't really grasp that opportunity, but I thought he was no worse than Bruno. And I love him. I love Bruno, but I thought he was really poor in that first half.
The midfield didn't really work at all.
And I thought Miley looks like a lad who's just feeling his way back again. I'm not saying in terms of fitness or whatever. It's that little bit of confidence that I think he needs, because last season at times when he got into his flow, he was a lad who's seen everything in front of him. That you'd see everything, and he was making forward progressive passes, forward progressive runs, balls, scored a goal or whatever.
Yeah.
His first touch at times, when I've seen him come on to games, and particularly in that game, I thought his first touch takes him back. And it's just that confidence, I think, when he builds his place, realises his place again in the team and in the squad. I think he's a fantastic player, very different player, and a player that almost, in my opinion, I've always said this, because of his physical profile and stature and ability to see the game in front of him, I've always thought he would play as a deeper midfielder more naturally. And obviously that place is hoovered up by a different kind of deeper player in Sandro Tonali at the minute. So I don't think Miley is necessarily suited to coming in on that left further forward, but Eddie Howe might see it differently. And I don't think Longstaff took his chance well.
No, that's the frustration with Sean Longstaff, where the last 2 games he started against lower league opposition just hasn't taken the chance.
No.
But I think he is a bit of a scapegoat at times, but we've discussed that in our last video. And yeah, Newcastle at Man City tomorrow. Are you picking the same team as me, or are you making any wholesale changes?
I don't know. I'm not really one of these tacticals. I'm not going to sit here and get a board out and stuff. It depends how Man City play. I mean, if you've got the personnel, I wouldn't be against against the big teams, I'm not against this 5 at the back. I think they've got enough defenders who know how to play that system. And we know Eddie Howe works on the 5 at the back and uses it when he needs it. I'm not against doing that again. Because I think you still, even though Man City aren't in their best moment, they're better than they were a month or two ago, still not in their best moment. I still think you're going to play the majority of the game on the break. So it's how you manage that. Defend really well, keep things really tight, keep yourself in the game, and then spring out and attack them. And I think that 5 gives you a good opportunity to do that. It makes you a little less open.
Puts pressure on the midfield too, though, to really perform, which
it's hard.
They did against Arsenal. But it's also when you're wanting to manage your team, the fatigue. 2 of your most important players, Bruno and Tonali, if you're asking them to get up and down for 90 minutes against Man City, it's going to wear them out.
Yeah.
And you saw that where in the Birmingham game the following week, Eddie Howe managed his squad where he only gave each player 45 minutes. But
I would counter that somewhat with the idea if you put Joe Willock in, who flits in and out of games anyway. Even at his very best, Joe Willock isn't an effective player for long lengths of time in a game. He'll come in and have a moment, or he'll drive a run, or he'll have a finish from nowhere, or
case in point was the Birmingham game.
It was. That's my problem with Joe Willock in a 3. Joe Willock play him out on the left like he did the other day, where he has to do a bit of the tracking, and it has to come back. He can do, but when he's right in the midfield engine room, tracking runners left, right, and centre, going forward, back. I don't think it's his real natural game. So I do think you lose a little bit when you put Joe Willock in the midfield, but I think he's probably done enough. I was reasonably impressed. I don't know if anybody else was. I was reasonably impressed by his performance. It wasn't just his goals. I thought he was decent. I thought he was a real bright spark, apart from Willa Sula. Was probably one of Newcastle United's brightest sparks, I thought, in that game, taking the goals out of the equation. So yeah, I think he's probably earned it. Yeah. It's just I'm never certain when he's in a midfield 3, particularly away from home.
Yeah, it's been an interesting season for him, a difficult season for him, as he put it as well. So it's about grasping that chance. He did it last week, and then Eddie Howe has to reward him, I think, just by default, really. You look at your midfield options, and he's the only one that stands out while Joe Linton's not there. Important thing regarding Joe Linton, though, we talk about injury updates. Eddie Howe said expects him to be back for the final. So that's good.
That is good news.
Because that's in your head. It's not in his, but said Eddie Howe...
what about Jamal Lascelles? Anybody's asking about him?
That was my second question.
Was it really?
It? Yes, it was.
You never got it out?
No, because I was like, well, speaking of the defence, Jamal Lascelles, how far is he away? Because it was a couple of weeks ago.
I think he's about the final, the way that
I think so, because he said he's a few weeks from being back, like in training.
Yeah, so I think he's got a chance of being on the bench in the final, I think.
So yeah, I'll get that out to Eddie Howe at some point, if no one else does anyway.
Yeah, do so.
So yeah, but before we wrap up, of course, as always, Brandlin, good partners of the Geordie Journals, but we've got our 3 esteemed sponsors. Here are Comply IT Limited. Worrying about disposing of your old IT equipment? Don't be. Comply IT handle everything. Secure collection, detailed tracking, and certified data destruction. That's Comply IT Limited. We've also got Mitigate. Mitigate enhances workplace mental health, helping businesses stay compliant, reduce absences, and unlock higher productivity, creating healthier, happier teams. And of course, our OG sponsors, 4 Rivers Financial Planning. 4 Rivers Financial Planning offer holistic financial advice for all stages of life, ensuring your plan remains robust and adaptable in the ever-changing world we live in. Yeah, those were our 3 sponsors. Links, as always, in the description, along with the Geordie Journal shop. If you want any merchandise, nice hoodie.
You need to design something for the final, man. That's what you need.
Ooh. Any ideas?
Little task for you.
Need a manifest. I'll tell you what, the Geordie Journal's CFAX mugs will be in high demand if Newcastle end up winning.
Oh, mate,
I'll have them good to go.
That's the one.
Full-time whistle. I'll have the graphic.
That'll be your first. That's going to be Dom's first tweet. Newcastle in their first domestic trophy for 70 years. Get your Liverpool 0, Newcastle United 4, Carabao Cup final.
I'd take that.
Mug.
Mate.
I would take that. Yeah.
No,
I'd buy 20.
Just next Geordie Journal's video.
I would, yeah. I'll buy 20. I'd give them. You know what? If Newcastle win the cup, we're going to give away 20 of those mugs.
Give one to Eddie Howe, so when he's in his pre-match press conference, he's holding it up.
We'll have to do a promotion. We'll give away. We'll do that, and I've said it live. We'll give away. We'll not care. We'll win the cup.
Yeah.
All
this hard work, we've just crumbled the Geordie Journos.
I mean, Jordan hasn't agreed to this. That's
No.
just me on a whim saying something on a video, but we'll do something.
Yeah, I'm sure we will.
We'll now.
You win the cup,
We'll not care.
your mind goes elsewhere.
Yeah, it does,
Life changing as you've sort of got.
It is, aye. Cups for cups.
But in the meantime, back to Premier League, the bread and butter of your season, if you like. Manchester City tomorrow. We'll be there. Good to have you back.
Yeah.
At a Premier League game as well.
Yeah.
Where we'll be joined by Jordan, of course, at the Etihad Stadium. Not a happy hunting ground for Newcastle, but I think they go into this game with probably confidence that they haven't previously had going to the Etihad, given Man City's sort of relatively to what they're used to iffy form. And Newcastle have won the last 6 on the road, which includes Man U, Arsenal, grounds they never really win at.
Yeah.
Spurs as well. So.
If you offered us a point now, I would snap your hand off. Still, even with the circumstances,
Yeah.
I would. I'm a bit realist when it comes to things like that. I think there's momentum with Newcastle United, but Man City are better than they were, and I think this is the it's not the usual Man City, but this tends to be the business end for them, where they do get stronger as seasons goes on. Rafa Benitez had a lot of conversations with him when he was at Newcastle United. He was a winning manager. Always talked about the idea of setting a team up. Like, you don't want a team really to fly out the blocks at the start of the season. You really want your team when cup finals, cup semi-finals, when leagues are to be won. That's when you want a team to really be coming into their own. Yeah. And Pep Guardiola just has that down to a T, that his teams get stronger as the season goes on. We're yet to see whether this team, with all the upset and all the turmoil there's been, will do that. But I suspect they will, and I think they'll be there or thereabouts where they're meant to be. They're obviously probably not going to win the league this year, but I would suspect they'll be in the top 2 or 3 come the end of the season. And Newcastle United, if you can take a point at the Etihad, I would probably take that. Yeah,
and with 14 games to go, if you took being level on points with Man City, you would have took it as well. So.
Absolutely.
So hopefully
you would have took being how many points behind Nottingham Forest?
Is it 6?
We're not catching it all.
That's why the game at St James's is so important. You close that gap.
That's of all the games in the run up to this, that's the key. But then if you lose all the others and they win them, then who knows? I think it's all eyes on the 16th of March for me.
Yeah. My mind's going completely off, but I thought it was. Did you see Elliot Anderson's interview?
I didn't.
Oh, he was asked about Forest. He was like, "You're 22 years old, Elliot. It'd be great to be playing in the Champions League for Nottingham Forest." And you could see in his head, he was like, "I'm playing in the Champions League when I was 20 for Newcastle." I've been there, done that. He went, "Well, yeah, Forest haven't been there in a while, so yeah that would be good." I think Forest will get Champions League.
I do too, because it's top 5. I don't see.
They'd have to drop off a cliff, which they haven't looked like.
They've not looked like doing.
And every little falter that they had, they got beat off Bournemouth, as Newcastle did. Bournemouth again, they could be in that conversation, and then they just go and beat Brighton 7-0. It's like, wow, fair play to them.
Yeah, so my focus would be, if I had to say, I would say it's all focus on the Carabao Cup. You win the Carabao Cup, you're already in Europe, and then the rest's a free shot. Yeah, the rest of your season's a free shot. It completes everything for you. It's not the competition you choose. Obviously, nobody really wants to be in that competition, although you would have taken it this season.
Unless you're like Lawn FC.
Yeah, I mean, there's some like
Newcastle,
Irish teams out front.
It's a Newcastle partner club, isn't it?
Yeah. Anybody play for them?
I think Isaac Westendorf went there.
No, that is.
No. Under 21.
Is he now?
Well, he was.
Yeah.
Is it Isaac there?
You had a trial there, didn't you?
No. It's too far away from me.
Right. Time to wrap up, I think, Doc.
Yes, it's been a long one.
Yeah.
Sorry for keeping you.
No, that's all right.
Get back to work as I will as well. So yeah, hope you've enjoyed this video. Please remember to like, comment, share, subscribe, ring the bell for all your Geordie Journos content. And myself, Liam and Jordan will be back reflecting on Newcastle United's match at the Etihad Stadium, where they take on Manchester City. We'll see you then.